Do you have relationships with vendors, services, software, hardware, that kind of thing? It's vital for you and your company to have a great relationship with your vendors, and I'm going to give you 5 tips on just how you can do that. This is Productivity Ace. Let's get it done. I've dealt with dozens of vendors over the last 20 years, maybe even hundreds, and boy has there been a variation in the quality of those relationships that I've had. Some of them have been fantastic and others have been absolutely terrible. But all of them have been critically important to the success or otherwise of my role and that of my team. And they will be for you as well. Managing the relationship with a key supplier or vendor can make or break the service you're trying to provide to your clients and can have dramatic effects on your own career progression as well. So here are 5 top tips that you can use right now to ensure that you get the best out of your vendor relationship. And before the tips, if any of this video provides any value to you whatsoever, then do consider hitting that like button because it tells YouTube that this is decent content and they'll show it to more people. And if you want to subscribe, well, that's even better. Tip number 1, share your roadmap. A very useful tip that I always make sure I do with vendors is to share my project roadmap for the year with the account management team and other key contacts. We usually meet in January and I lay out month by month what I'm planning for the team and how those plans fit into senior management and company priorities. We go into quite a bit of detail, discuss projects, resources, people, nothing confidential, but all the relevant information that's needed. This always proves to be a really useful session because it allows the vendor to plan and anticipate specific challenges that you might face, and then they can take actions accordingly. For example, you might have a major software upgrade at the end of Q2, and that allows the vendor to be ready to mobilize extra support resources for you at that time. They can plan ahead. Or if you've got a period of planned absences in your team, then the vendor might know that you're going to be less able to maybe advance some of their other initiatives or respond to them in the usual timely manner. Anything they can do to get a heads up on what you're doing. All of this information allows a great deal of forward planning and can also help spot potential issues that might crop up later in the year. You might also learn when the vendor may have gaps of their own so that you can potentially move things around in your roadmap to accommodate and get the best possible support from the vendor. It's a really useful exercise. Share that roadmap for your team and for your service. Pay promptly. Now this is a fairly basic one, but you'd be amazed by how many times a customer doesn't pay on time. Sometimes the vendors do have unrealistic payment terms that don't fly for very large companies, and large companies have convoluted approvals processes, but on the whole it should generally be possible to meet vendor payment terms. Failure to pay on time or to delay significantly might not cause a huge problem at first, but if it keeps going it'll become an ever-growing irritation for your vendor, and that may cause the quality of the relationship to degrade. And if your company does indeed have those convoluted and inefficient payment processes, well, it's a good idea to make this known to the vendor early on so they can set their own expectations or maybe make some tweaks at their end to minimize the impact. You should always be looking to take as much friction out of the purchase process on both ends as possible. And failure to pay on time can really have an impact, especially around the end of financial year periods where pulling in every last dollar makes a huge difference for your account manager. It directly feeds into their bonus. They're going to be keen to get those deals over the line and they won't appreciate any delays. Look for the easy wins. As part of a typical vendor relationship, you, as the customer, will want things. Be that the software or hardware or service that you're paying for, and the vendor will want things as well. They'll want you to buy more of what they're offering and possibly for a higher price. And negotiating that price might be challenging, but generally when it's done, it's done. It's not something you're going to want to revisit too many times. So how can you ensure that your vendor continues to be happy and engaged throughout the relationship? One useful technique is to look for easy wins that you can give something back to the vendor. And I'm not talking about money here, or extra products or extra services. There is plenty of value that you as a key customer can provide to a vendor that doesn't cost you anything. Examples such as acting as a reference customer. Offer to speak to potential customers of your vendors, or give your opinion on various forums. I've done hundreds of reference calls where I've spoken to a company that's maybe thinking of using the vendor, thinking of onboarding them, thinking of purchasing their product. And I always make sure that I offer my completely honest and open advice, highlighting the good and the bad, and I help these people make their own decisions. Sometimes those calls lead to the vendor getting extra business, which is fantastic, and sometimes they don't. That's fine. But they're always appreciated by the vendor because they're a great way of helping them get their message out, and also you will build up really good relationships with people in similar business areas at those other companies, people who are thinking of using similar services. Or you could offer to speak at one of the vendor conferences. Getting up on stage in front of an audience is not only a fun experience, somewhat daunting sometimes, but the vendor will absolutely love you for it, and you'll also seriously expand your own network as well. Or you could offer to write a blog on the vendor website or a review of one of their products or something like that. There are many of these easy wins that you can use to give back to the vendor, and they'll be super appreciative for it. Be careful not to become vendor dependent. So when things are going well with your vendor, it's great. Services and product are making a difference to your business, the vendor's getting regular cash from you and commitment, everybody's happy. But always make sure this isn't taking you into a situation where you get completely dependent on that vendor, because you'll be going along great and feeling like everyone's going to be happy forever, but that will not continue indefinitely, I guarantee it. At some point, sometime in the future, the vendor's attitude will change. That might be prompted by a management change on their side, or just the vendor sniffing an opportunity to make more money. Maybe there's pressure in the marketplace, maybe other things aren't going well and they're using you as an opportunity. So what happens? They jack up the price and you're stuck with no other option other than to pay it, because if you don't, you'll lose the product and you'll be stuffed. You're totally at their mercy. It's not good. As a leader, you always need to make sure that your vendors are facing some form of competition that prevents you from ending up in this situation. That might be another vendor that offers a similar service or product, or a potential strategy change that means you could move away from your preferred vendor should you wish to another vendor. So it's always nice to assume that people and companies will always do the right thing, but in reality, it's only a matter of time before something like this happens. I've seen it too many times with my own eyes. And I remember when I was young and new to the business, it totally took me by surprise that people could change their attitudes like that. So make sure you're protected at all times. Avoid the blame game. Things won't always go well with your vendors. Software and hardware will break. People will let you down, the product won't always work as advertised, you'll be sure to have challenging times. In cases like that, it's vital not to automatically assume that it's the vendor's fault. Sometimes it will be, but getting into the blame game will seriously sour relationships, and it will also make it a lot harder to fix the problems and prevent them from happening again. And then, when the next issue happens, and it just so happens to be your fault, well, that can be pretty embarrassing if you've just unloaded on your vendor the last time when it was their fault. It's important to understand at the beginning of the partnership, issues will happen on both sides. So take each issue as it comes, partner up with their support teams and work collaboratively to fix things. If it's your fault, admit it. If it's the vendor's fault and you expect them to do better, then state that. But try to work together to understand why the problems are occurring at either end, and so you can stop them happening again. Your vendor will be super appreciative that you don't go instantly sending angry emails to their senior leadership every time they've made a mistake. And sometimes you might be tempted to, but thinking of the bigger relationship is critical. If you like this video, hit that like button or even subscribe. And I also think you'll like this video up here. I'll see you over there in a second.